Welcome to the family.
Greetings and welcome back, family. So today we're going to talk about relationships. This is a topic that was sent to us by one of our wonderful viewers, and they want us to talk about relationships. So we're going to go ahead and jump into that. And so relationships, that is a huge, huge, huge topic. And we're going to talk about relationships as we think about it, our perceptions, share as much or as little as we feel comfortable. That's what I encourage you ladies to do. And so I'm just going to ask, what are your thoughts about relationships? And Dr. Riaja, we'll start with you.
Thank you for the question. So relationships, as you mentioned, is such a huge topic. Trying to think where to begin. What comes readily to mind is first, relating to yourself is very important. So what type of relationship do you have with yourself? And then relating to others. I believe that relationships make the world go round. We do not live in isolation. We relate to people on a daily basis. You know, our tribe, our village, our community is so important. And I don't think anyone can truly live their authentic life outside of relationships, being in relationships, because relationships, really good relationships actually is like a mirror. Like your good friends that you relate to, your family members, they literally kind of hold up a mirror to you so that you can see yourself. So that is my thought or thoughts on relationships.
Thank you, Dr. Riaja. Yes, that mirror. Sometimes we can take that mirror and sometimes we cannot. But those, like you mentioned, those really good friends, those loved ones that can jump in with us and just hold up that mirror, whether we're feeling it or not, definitely people we want to keep in our lives. Dr. Safronia, what are your thoughts?
So relationships, when I think about relationships, similar to what Dr. Riaja just said, is that internal relationship first, and then you look at your external relationships. And mine goes a little bit beyond that, because in science, right, we have relationships with other things too, inanimate objects and the universe and, soil and weather and climate and everything else like that too. So I really think about my relationship with all of my environment being that way. And sometimes my relationships with my personal relationships with friends, family, and coworkers and acquaintances and things like that, it really is centered around our environment. So the environment that we're in sort of helps to shape the relationship that we have. And that's a great way to look at, that's a great way that I look at relationships and how to build relationships and how to cultivate those types of relationships that I want to have. And both of you mentioned the mirror, right? It goes back to looking at yourself in the mirror. And I find that my personal relationships, be it, family, friends, or coworkers, is that we're always have that unspoken, the underlining thing that comes out, and where we can just look at each other and be like, and it doesn't matter if we grew up together, we didn't grow up together, if we just worked together for 2 days, you have that unspoken word that's there, and it's our environment that helps us to shape that language that we have with each other. So relationships are huge. They're always changing, and that's a great thing, is that they're so dynamic as well.
Yes, I mean, you mentioned so many different things, just being in relationship with everything that we encounter in our lives and having that verbal and nonverbal aspect within our relationships. And I agree with both of you. And I always talk about intentionality in relationships. And so we are always in relationship with everyone and everything, in this universe. And so it can be an intentional or unintentional. And when I talk about intentional, it means that we're actually working, right? Dr. Strong, you talk about that. we're cultivating this relationship. We want this relationship to be something that we want it to be, and not just, leave it to whatever and have so many, different aspects come in. And now it's something that we don't even want to be in anymore. We want to separate ourselves from. And there's a lot of things that we can control, and there's a lot of things that we can't control, but we can always work and cultivate our relationships. And it is work. It takes work, and it takes consistent work. And the unintentional relationships, I consider those the people that I pass on the street. I may not know your name. I may not know, anything about you, but I at least say hi, or we exchange that look, right? Dr. Strong, you talk about that look. We exchange that look and just a greeting. And so we're in relationship. And guess what? We're making it intentional, because we're intentionally looking at each other in the eyes. We're intentionally doing the head nod, or saying, how are you, or good morning. So we are making it intentional, and we can make our unintentional relationships intentional, or we can leave them unintentional, but we're always in relationship. That energy is always bouncing off, and it's all about communication, whether it's verbal or nonverbal communication. Communication is key. And like, I mentioned in a couple episodes before, I deal with relationships all the time. That is the work that I do in restorative justice. And I always talk about healthy, positive relationships. What does that look like? What could that look like? The people involved in that relationship, what work needs to be done, what understanding needs to be done. And most conflict, and I'll just go into conflict because conflict is normal. Harm should never be normalized, and some conflict should never be normalized. But being in conflict is something that we enter in and out daily with each other, within ourselves. And so when we look at conflict, we want to turn that conflict into something where we come out on the other side and grow from. Right? We can move through that conflict. We learned a new skill. We learned how to be. We had that conversation, that intentional conversation, and now we come out on the other side and we have growth from it. And that's the way I look at relationships. Relationships is about growth. My relationship with some loved ones shouldn't and doesn't look like it did 10 years ago, because we're 10 years older. So it should grow into something else. And that's okay. Sometimes it grows into something that we shy away from. And sometimes it grows into something that we want to move in closer, and we want more of. We want to share that with others. And so any other thoughts that you all want to throw out there before I ask the next question? Just based on what you heard.
I just love what Dr. Sophronia mentioned about relationship with like the universe and, nature, inanimate objects and things like that. That brings it to such a wider array when you kind of think about the whole idea of relationships, because we are in relationships with nature, so yes, so I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, and I was thinking about what Dr. Kamoya was saying about sometimes all relationships are work, right? So you have to put in the work in order for this relationship to grow. And when you don't put in work it's the power of entropy. So it's just, it goes in array, because it doesn't take work for disorganization. It takes work for organization. And the universe itself is moving towards more disorganization, but we have the power to organize it the way that we want to see it fit. So I thought that was really cool, that sometimes we put the work in because we want that relationship to grow and to mature and to grow and to do great things. And sometimes we don't put that energy in. And then those are the relationships that we let just fall by, or let take whatever shape that relationship is going to take, because then we don't have a vested interest of that relationship.
Absolutely. And I mean, everything you ladies said, I 100% concur with. And it made me think of actually my next question, which is, I'm always talking about self-care, but with self-care also comes communal care, because again, we don't live in a bubble. We're not on an island. We interact with folks all the time. And so my question is, thinking about under the umbrella of relationships, using that concept, what does your self-care look like? So what does a relationship with yourself look like, so that you can have something to give to others, so that then you can think about communal care? So what does that self-relationship look like, and what does that relationship with others look like? How do you cultivate that? Just maybe give a few examples for our audience. And Dr. Sophronia, why don't we start with you first?
Yeah, self-care, boy. So I'm still learning a lot of self-care. But one thing that I definitely do for self-care is take time just to go out in nature. I know a couple episodes back we did talk about um, just how do we proceed in power, kind of thing. So this is one of those things that, okay, I have to take the time to reflect and figure out where I am, how much self-care do I really need? And then how much of it is just because I just don't want to do it. Right. So that's interesting to me. So that relationship with myself, I had to recognize those times when, no, I'm just tired. And then the other ones is, no, this is really my way of doing self-care. And then I do that by walking, by going to water features like waterfalls or streams or ponds, beaches or things like that, just to get out into nature. And as well as it just engaging in conversation with others as well, because it gets me to think of other things that I can do or what else is a possibility for me. So exposure is a really good form of self-care for me. How does that transfer into communal care? So my self-care, I tend to do the work inside so that I can show up differently in any situation. So I try to take the things that I learned during my self-care, my reflection moments, and then also apply those and give those tidbits and little nuggets over to the community so that the community knows, oh, okay, this is a form of self-care, but in essence, we can use this in a broader way so that we can now have communal care. And we're still taking care of ourselves, but now we're doing this in this group exercise where now the group is now caring for themselves, but we're also caring for the group at large as well.
Yes. So I heard, in a communal way, thinking about self, but within that community, actually that energy is just moving around. It's a reciprocal energy that now you're sharing all of that energy. And I'm thinking of circles. I do restorative justice. And so I'm just thinking of, I'm literally have my brain just thinking of that energy is moving around the circle as each person is working on self, whatever that looks like for them. And it doesn't have to look like the next person, but what it looks like for you is okay because you're not infringing on the other person's self-care, but you're sharing that energy. You're honoring the other person's self-care. I love that. Dr. Riaja, what are your thoughts?
So I think with self-care, I have to be introspective, I have to be intentional, and I have to be grateful. So definitely looking within and understanding what I need in the moment and what I need to do in the moment to care for myself, whether that is actually engaging with another person, which is very important, or spending time in solitude. And I am definitely a nature person. I love being out in nature. So that is a great place to be very reflective and grateful. I'm grateful for the soil. I'm grateful for the sun. I'm grateful for the water. I'm even grateful for the insects because they play their role. Yes. So, and then how do I translate that into community? I think being the best Riaja I can be is very important for community, because if I'm at my peak level, or for the day, or for the moment, I should say, I am able to help others, and vice versa, because we don't always function at maximum capacity. Sometimes part of community is being able to receive. So understanding that we can't always be the givers, sometimes the best thing we can do in community is receive. And that helps others as well. So that's kind of what I think about with self-care and how that can translate into community.
Yes, again, that reciprocal process. Right. Also, what I heard from you, Dr. Riaja, was understanding where you are in that moment. So really, really understanding, okay, do I have it to give right now? Do I need to pull back and actually be alone for a minute so that I can fill my cup and then I can, help others. I can empty it into another person's cup, if you will. And that's so important. And when I think of self-care, sometimes solitude is where I need to be. I work with people all day. And sometimes I just need to put on something and just have it be white noise actually in the background so that it actually interrupts my thoughts so that I can just be. Because when you're doing a lot, you're holding a lot, especially, as a parent. I always go back to my parenting when I first realized self-care was important so that my communal care can be 100%. If self-care isn't 100%, no way in the world my communal care was going to be 100%. And my son was maybe 3 years old. And I was like, I'm giving a lot. I need to pull back a little bit. I need to ask for help. And that's another way of doing self-care. I also need to start saying no to a lot of things. Stop taking things on. That's okay. I can do that. And we can still be okay if I'm not the person that's going to take that on. And it's just been, my stress level has gone down. My negative stress level has gone down, and my positive stress level has gone up, if that makes sense, because I feel like we need a little bit of stress for that motivational piece. And so when I think about me making that shift from my self-care to my communal care, I actually think I have more to give now. I actually say no less. I process with people so that I don't have to say no, because now I've built my skill set so that I can show up and model for others. And I actually don't have to say no, because in me modeling, I'm showing up differently and they're taking on they're seeing what I'm doing. And sometimes I don't even know it until they tell me years later, yeah, you said this one thing to me, or you did this, and I've never forgotten. And I'm like, wow, okay, thank you. Thank you for letting me know. Because I also believe that we can't do self-introspection by ourselves. There's no way we don't know until somebody else tells us. And so just being like that, and I've just discovered that just showing up, being my best self, making sure that I'm attuned, like you said, Dr. Riaja, I'm attuned to where I am in this moment. And Dr. Sproni, you mentioned nature. You're always mentioning nature, and yes, nature is the business. One thing that I also am trying to get into for self-care also is communal care. And as our other sister talks about, is grounding. So actually taking off my shoes and walking around on the ground. And what does that mean? To connect to the earth. What does that mean? To share that energy so that self-care and communal care can always be high. What does that mean? And that I'm still in self-discovery. I don't have the answer for myself around that. And so I'm learning from other people, just in people who mentioned, Dr. Riaja, your beautiful garden that you showed in one of the episodes. Dr. Sprone, you're always mentioning water. Yes, water. I need to be in water. I need to be around water. I love to be out in the rain, have the water hit me from the sky. Water is just so cleansing for me. So I'm still on that journey, right? That journey of self-discovery. And I think I will always be on that journey. And I'm okay with that. I honor that. I'm grateful for that. And so I'm going to open it up for anybody else who just wants to reflect on anything that we heard before we close out. Any other thoughts or comments?
I would like to just encourage the viewers just to really comment on how they take their self-care into their communal care and how they really look at relationships. And what does that mean to be in relationship with yourself? And then what does that mean to be in relationship with others? So I really just want to encourage them to share with us more, and just, and then if we need to come back and do a follow-up episode on relationships and what that looks like, then we can do that and have that conversation as well.
Absolutely. And in relationship, as you said, Dr. Spronia, with the environment, right? So relationships is such a huge topic, and we can go down so many different avenues when we're talking about relationships. So hopefully, our wonderful viewers got some little gems out of our conversation. Like Dr. Spronia said, please share your thoughts. What works for you? Please help us. We're in a village. You're part of our village. You're part of our family. And we honor you and respect you. And we love you. And we appreciate you. And so until next time, please remember to proceed in power. thank you for being with us. We're sending you love, light, and positive energy. And remember to proceed